This amendment be agreed to, and I call the member for Fremantle.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I support this motion. It's long past time that we saw change in this space. It's long past time that we saw the end of the long-haul live sheep export industry. What I'm not going to do, and speaking in support of this motion, is continue what we've seen too much of in this place, which is a kind of a rush to push out false division, false conflict, false dichotomies, a rush to kind of caricature one another, for the member of O'Connor to suggest that somehow the people in Fremantle and the people in Denmark and Albany are living on different planets, to suggest that that he cares for small business owners and farmers and truck drivers, and that I don't. And I don't know people who do that work. I'm not connected to those communities. I don't care about West Australians. Or that it's only people in communities like Fremantle and inner city areas that care about animal welfare, and not people in his community. That's the problem with this place. The problem with this place is that we're playing games when everyone here knows that there is a majority of support for the change that needs to be made. This industry is coming to an end. It's a doomed industry. It's a deeply flawed industry, and it's coming to an end. And the responsible thing to do for farmers and truck drivers and people on the land is to manage that transition and support those people. And I will always do that, and I will always speak up for that. And it's ridiculous to come in here and shout at each other across the benches as if somehow people who live in Fremantle have got no sympathy or no understanding of the circumstances of people who live on the land. It's just utterly ridiculous. There are people who live in Fremantle who spent most of their lives growing up in your part of the world, Member for O'Connor, and there are people who live in Albany in Denmark who spent most of their lives growing up in my part of the world. And they're Australians, and they care about their families, and they care about animal welfare. So the idea that we're somehow, you're from Venus and we're from Mars is just complete rubbish. What we do know is that this industry is rotten to the core. The long-haul live export of sheep to the Middle East in terrible, rusty old, second-rate vessels at the hottest time of the year is a recipe for animal cruelty and animal suffering. And it doesn't matter whether the sheep die or not. We've had veterinarians since this whole review process began come out and say quite clearly that whether they die or not doesn't mean that they haven't suffered terrible, terrible, terrible pain on that journey, and we know that. And this industry is on its knees, and the people who are involved in it need our help.
The member for O'Connor, I've asked you twice not to interject. You can leave under 94A.
To support the transition that is already underway.
You can leave under 94A. I've continually asked him not to, and he's kept going and going. Well done. First person I've ever had to do that to.
Deputy Speaker, the reality is that the live long-haul export of sheep is inherently cruel, and it's long past time for it to come to an end. We have had countless evidence of the atrocities that are inherent in this trade. They occur time and time again. There is literally a parade of atrocities, and we only come to know of them because of the work of animal welfare activists and people in that space. We haven't learned of them because of the regulatory framework. We haven't learned of them because of the actions of government. We've learned of them because of animal welfare experts who, for a long time, in my community particularly and elsewhere, have belled the cat on this industry, have said that this cannot go on. The government has to acknowledge that it has been complicit in the failures of this industry, that it has enabled the failures of this industry, that it has been an apologist for those failures. It has both put its head in the sand about the fact that animals have been subject to torture time and time again, that animals have been subject to torture as a matter of customary industry practice, and it has actively removed the kinds of mechanisms that militate against that treatment, that cruelty to animals. So for people, anyone on that side of the House, to claim that we have the best system in the world and that the system works well and there's nothing to see here, that is utterly false. And the Minister himself has acknowledged that multiple times this year. He is a member of a government, both in this term of parliament and in the previous term of parliament, that actively removed, no, he wasn't in this last term of parliament, but he's a member of the government that has been in control through both of those terms of parliament, that has actively removed protections when it comes to animal welfare, and his government has been complicit in those failures. It is time for us to make the change. The industry itself has only just voluntarily decided that there will be no summer trade next year. This is the same industry, this is the same Exporters Council that said that that kind of moratorium wasn't possible, that moratorium would mean the industry fell over. Well, we've seen this summer the trade didn't occur, and we're now told that the trade won't occur next summer. So the claim that the trade depends on these summer shipments, that has been done away with. And we know from that further transition is possible if this parliament is prepared to take responsible action. And that's what this motion is about. It's about giving us the opportunity to do what people send us here to do, which is consider issues carefully on the evidence and make decisions that lead change, that deliver the kinds of reform that people around this country know. And that's the disconnect that we've seen on this issue, on energy, on climate change, on so many things. The broader community knows that there's a problem. The broader community knows that there's a solution. They can't understand why people in this place can't get on and make it happen. And that is really what Labor has been calling for since the beginning of this year, and what this bill, the motion to bring this bill on, calls for, that independent members of this place are calling for. A sensible transition, the end to the summer trade, and over a period of time the end to the long-haul live export of sheep altogether. As part of that, of course, assistance to those who are involved in the farming of sheep. I say, as a Western Australian, that we've made it through this summer and the recent cessation of live export of sheep. Farmers in Western Australia and their representatives and the Live Export Council now are preparing for the fact that it will not occur next year. I talked to Tony York, he comes and sits with me. I caught up with him not that long ago, and I was very glad to hear that the farmers in Western Australia have got through this season comparatively well. There are a very small number of farmers who have made decisions, business decisions, to be heavily involved in live export, and they, of course, are feeling some effect. The vast majority of farmers, wheat sheep farmers and sheep farmers in Western Australia, have very small exposure to the live export trade, and they've been able to deal with this change. But at the end of the day, what are the things we have to hold on to? We have to hold on to the fact that the live long-haul export of sheep is inherently cruel. We have to hold on to the fact that there is not a sliding scale that makes animal cruelty acceptable at some kind of price. All economic arguments aside, there is not a sliding scale that makes torture of animals acceptable at some kind of price. And that's why the live export of sheep, long-haul live export of sheep, to the hottest part of the year, hottest part of the world at the hottest time of the year, has to come to an end. People in my community have known that for a long time. They don't care about the smell. They don't care about seeing trucks. They're glad that there are people driving trucks and that earn money driving trucks. They're glad that there are farmers who produce sheep and help put food on our table and help explore export markets. They're glad that the export markets in chilled carcasses and frozen meat are expanding. They're glad that countries like Bahrain, when Bahrain decided they weren't taking live export anymore, that Bahrain gets 70% of all its sheep meat from Australia. They know that that's the future. They know that New Zealand, a country where the agricultural economy is much more significant than it is to Australia, have got out of live sheep altogether. They know that nowhere other than in Western Australia and South Australia does live sheep export happen anyway. I've heard from farmers across the nation, people in Victoria and New South Wales, who've contacted me to say, mate, I would never put one of my animals, I would never put a sheep on a vessel like that. This industry is cruel. It's dominated by a few big business operators who have got into export and make money off it. It can change. It should change. It needs to change. We can make that change. It's what the community wants. They can't understand why we can't do it. This is an opportunity now to do something half sensible before we pack up for the year, before the government puts us into mothballs for the better part of 6 months. This is an opportunity to do something sensible that the community wants and that we can deliver.